Before we get started, thanks again for watching my videos. Please share and subscribe. Thank you. Last time we were talking about Marco Polo and his trip across Tartarian Europe, Asia, into the Chinese Empire of Persians, which was Indo-Aryan, and the indigenous Uyghur people whom had been displaced by the Han, whom come from the lands of Korea. And so let's get into what Marco Polo said about China. At the time, China was considered a Persian empire that was controlled by Genghis Khan. It was referred to as Kitay or Kitaya or Kitayo. Xin is the name of the emperor, which we derived the name China. At the time, the empires that surrounded Persia were the Ukrainian Cossack Empire, the Poles, the Byzantine Empire, the Bulgarians. Below Persians, there were the Mesopotamians. But in the center is an empire that is essentially remembered only through being conquered by the name of Khazaria. And Khazaria was a noble class of grand viziers, often were involved in the trading and the intellect of the other cities, including, this is perhaps where Byzantine got its name. But the Battle of Kiev, which is detailed in the story of Taurus Bulba, is about the Cossacks, whom Taurus Bulba is the chief of, and the Polacks, whom the Poles at the time were in cooperation to defeat the Ottoman Turks. So they had a pejorative, it's believed, that the Cossacks were called Tartarians and then called Cossacks when they were no longer Tartarians, as long as they were working with the empire. They were considered the saviors of the city of Kiev, which is in the modern day Ukraine, which gets its name from UCRANIUM, which means the skull. Now, according to legend, and in the movie, which is worth watching, I recommend, there's actually two. There's the American version and the Russian version. The American is a very fantastical 60s version. I'm surprised it could have ever gotten made, considering the subject matter. And the Russian version is essentially the modern Braveheart of the 21st century Russia. So Taurus Bulba tells the tale of two brothers who are raised outside of the care of their father after he is betrayed by the Poles, and their land is taken from them. So he vows that they will deceive the Poles by educating their sons in Polish schools, and eventually they will overthrow the Poles and they will return the cities to their own people, and the Cossacks will save again Kiev, this time from the Poles. And it's perhaps interesting that Kiev is so close to Khazaria and that this is the area where the Cossacks would have been invading from, according to this legend. Because the Cossacks, who are considered to be the pogroms of the Russians who destroyed and caused the great emigration into New York of the Jewish people of New York and of Canada, are also from the same place. And there is a correlation etymologically between Khazarian languages, and there is genetic evidence that the Khazarians are the modern Ashkenazi Jewish people. And in fact, it is difficult to find a Sephardic genome in the Ashkenazi. In other words, it is difficult to say that the Ashkenazi are from Palestine, but are definitively from modern-day Georgia, which is where Khazaria was. It's currently Georgia, near Russia. So The other interesting etymological link is the Finns. And the Finns have their flag, which is the Air Force flag, with the Shvazi on it, with a propeller, which it's very interesting that the propeller on wings is so Sumerian looking. And if you were to just put your thumb over the center of the symbol so that you can't see the objectionable content, it would seem very, very, very Mesopotamian. However, this symbol is, of course, older than the 20th century German revolution's National Socialism, and so the flag is continually waved to this day. So, an interesting side note about the Khazarian correlation. Also, the Finnish people, their language is not Indo-Aryan. It is not connected to Sanskrit. It has 24 cases, which alludes to a derivative culture of many castes and high formality for interaction between aristocracy and merchant classes and different sorts of people and workers. So, but these symbols have existed for a long time, and we inherited these fallen stars. And the thing about these symbols is they're not meant to be understood often by the layman. And so they can go on for a long time and have new meaning that has been ascribed to them. An example is the post office symbol of the United States, which used to be, before it was an eagle, the symbol of Mercury riding upon the Earth disk of America and handing off a message. Another is the Jolly Roger skull. Skull comes from the Hebrew word for the skull that blossoms, skull, which means rose, as a skull blossoms from the womb. It is also called the Jolie Rouge, and it was a flag that was used not by, well, sometimes perhaps by pirates. Pirates didn't have their own flags. They would take other people's flags, right? But it would make sense for a pirate to take a banking flag like this because they would want to look like a banking ship. And since the Jolly Rouge was used pretty much by the Knights Templar and the banking ships to show that they were an armed ship, and we call it the Jolly Roger because of the French translation, the Jolie Rouge, which is because it was a red flag used by the Normans.